My name is Nina Moeller. I have a bit of a mixed academic background, mostly in sociology and anthropology, philosophy. And I'm currently a research fellow in human geography at the University of Manchester in England. Amongst other things, I work in the Ecuadorian Amazon, particularly in the Upper Napo region. How does it work? Do I need to do anything in particular? In the Upper Napo region and in Quechua communities. First, between 2005 and 2008 for my PhD, which was on the protection of traditional medicinal knowledge, and more recently for research projects on rural development and change. I will talk to you today about Amazonian forest gardens and a slowly evolving research project which my partner Martin and I are developing in collaboration with people in Ecuador. This is the title again. So, most of you will know that the Amazon rainforest in South America is the largest tropical rainforest in the world, representing over half of the remaining rainforests on the planet. It covers 5.5 million square kilometers, which is 11 times the size of Spain. It carries 1/5 of the world's fresh water and probably produces 20% of the world's oxygen. For most people, and maybe for some of you, the Amazon rainforest is the wilderness, untouched nature, pristine biodiversity. But as you've also heard from Wade Davis this Friday, we now know that this idea is based on almost 500 years of fantasy and denial. In 1541, shortly after the conquest of Peru and Ecuador, Francisco de Orellana, leading a violent expedition, traveled down the Amazon River. His chronicler Carvajal recorded sprawling cities living in abundance. Carvajal described the Amazon as a busy waterway, which had on both sides of the river populous towns with elaborate temples, plazas, and fortresses. He recorded cities that extended for miles and described a superabundance of food. He marveled at the, quote, slight amount of work, unquote, that all this food required. At the time, his account was written off as hype. The conquesting powers could not conceive of other people rather than themselves, especially not if they didn't have to work much for the happiness of other civilized people than themselves. There are, of course, obvious reasons for the disappearance of these people and their cities in the short time span between the first expeditions. Disease, enslavements, and warfare eradicated most of the population. It is widely agreed that 90% were killed within 50 years of first contact, and that's not just in the Amazon, but in all of the Americas. Unsurprisingly, cities built with biodegradable materials, wood, palm leaf, forest fibers, etc., leave virtually no trace when they fall, especially in the tropics. During the past 3 decades, archaeologists, geographers, soil scientists, geneticists, and ecologists have presented a complex picture of the Amazon as made up of a diversity of landscapes, many of which have been heavily managed, and in some cases even wholly created by humans, at least for the last 4,500 years. Large parts of the Amazon are not wilderness, but in fact a carefully created forest garden. Maybe the most important findings are dark earth and evidence of large-scale civilizations. Terra preta, or dark earth, is basically a high-grade compost made from burnt wood, left over from meals, human wastes. This human-made soil has been found throughout the Amazon in patches of 1 to 360 hectares. 360 hectares, that's 500 football fields. And in some places, they go up to 6 feet deep, and this is thought by some to cover up to 10% of the Amazon, which would be about the size of Spain. In some places, dark earth is more than 2,000 years old and still highly active. It can now be bought as expensive potting soil in Brazil. In the early 2000s, archaeologists excavated lost, complex cities laid out with astronomical precision. Some of these cities forming a network of connected settlements with roads, water management, canals, causeways, dark earth and orchards, are over 1,000 years old. Evidence suggests that some of these settlements were multicultural, multilingual urban spaces where a multitude of tribes lived together. And it points to large sedentary civilizations with complex technology. While there continues to be some debate about the exact geographical extent of the human involvement in the biodiversity of the Amazon, this work has established that the so-called virgin forest is to an important degree anthropogenic. It's a cultural forest, a horticultural artifact, a wild garden sculptured for millennia through the creation of black earths and the selection and promotion of some species and the containment of others. Or, as the older Napuruna would have it, the Napuruna are the indigenous Quechua people with whom I work in Ecuador. The forest, its flora and fauna, has been maintained since time immemorial through powerful, respectful, and intimate relations between humans and non-humans. The lived forest relations of Amazonian peoples constitute a biocultural praxis that has historically given shape to the biodiverse image of the forest that conservationists seek to preserve. This, I think, has important implications. One, it has implications for conservation in the Amazon. There are still maybe 250,000 Amazonians, indigenous Amazonians living across the region, still speaking about 170 different languages. Yet many conservation areas are still designed to keep humans out and protect the forest from interference, a strategy that seems completely misguided in the light of the human significance in the very evolution of forest biodiversity. Two, in a world beset by multiple interconnected crises, with everyone scrambling to find sustainable solutions, the Amazon's history is encouraging. People can enrich their environment, even if their populations are large and their societies are complex. And this really, for me, is a philosophical implication. We might say that a particular human-forest relation has enhanced the forest, made it more abundant, more diverse. This is a very different approach and perspective than that of conservation or sustainability, both words which aim to keep things as they are, rather than work together to make things richer. This perspective of connection and enhancement has to inform, so I argue, collective strategies of reparation and regeneration urgently required to replace the hollow paradigm of sustainable development we currently find ourselves in. It also provides another angle to debates on the Anthropocene, the idea that we find ourselves now in an epoch that is characterized by significant human impact on the Earth's geology and ecosystems. Neither embracing the misanthropy and self-flagellation of humankind's irrevocable destruction of our own habitat, nor adopting the hyper-capitalist techno-fixes of geoengineering, the more than sustainable perspective of enhancement or enrichment points to the other side of the Anthropocene, the side where we take responsibility for the creation of our habitat, because we realize that our multiple energy and resource exchanges with the natural world, that is our social metabolism, produces the world we live in. With this understanding as a background, we are developing an action research project aimed to revive and revitalize ancestral chakras in the Napo region. The traditional chakra system is basically a network of several polycultural forest gardens, all producing food, medicine, fibers, building materials, and more for the household. These gardens can be distributed across large territories, located at varying distances from the primary home of the household group, and some might be several days' walk away. They used to be of great biological diversity. In the past, more than 150 different cultivated plant species have been documented in individual gardens, and today we often find less than 50. These gardens mimic the complexity and structure of the natural forest that surrounds them, and they can have fallow periods for several decades. The chakra has always been the center of Quechua life, the basis for good health, a space where social bonds and community relations were created and maintained, often in mingas, collective work parties, and where much intergenerational transmission of knowledge unfolded, including a very literal speaking with the plants. It is in the chakra that ayahuasca and many other medicines are nurtured. The Napuruna, the indigenous Quechua people from the upper Napo River, have had, and in some cases still have, effective relationships to the non-human inhabitants of the forest, to animals, plants, rocks, caves, watercourses, and their spirit masters, which resemble relationships people usually have with other people. For the Napuruna, at least the older generations, animal and plants are not qualitatively different beings from humans. Plants speak, and animals can marry humans and have children with them. They have the same subjectivities. They all experience the world from an I point of view. Human people can, do, and need to make important alliances with non-human people. They can also upset them and put themselves at danger. They can become prey, they can be abducted by river or underground spirits. Certain cultivated plants are treated as estranged lovers or difficult children whom one must woo for them to grow well. Wild medicinal plants need to be approached politely before harvest if they are to heal anyone properly. Yet increasingly evicted from the forest or forced to live on ever smaller parcels of it, Napuruna appear condemned to develop what they refer to as the needs of the city, a term used to highlight the desires and necessities that mysteriously exude from the consumer culture of urban spaces. Struggling to integrate into consumer society in a dignified manner, as well as struggling to retain a healthy and joyful existence at its margins or on the outside, many Napuruna are caught in a double bind and urban poverty looms large. The Tena Archidona area where my work is focused is growing into one big urban zone that potentially could become more than twice the size of Paris if we take into consideration the construction of the Tena Coca Road on the east of the Napo River. We could be looking at an area, this is the Tena Archidona area, could be twice the size of Paris. And on the Tena Coca Road, we're looking at an area of potential urban and peri-urban development that is 100 times the size of Paris. This appearance of tarmac, steel, and concrete does not only spell the disappearance of trees and the forest, but also in important ways the disappearance of the knowledge and power of the Yachak, that is the Quechua shaman. Consider these quotes from a conversation with Fidel Andi, a Napuruna Yachak in Curandero, who was supposed to be here with us today, actually, but who very upsettingly didn't get a visa. This conversation took place in 2007. Quote, "It is not enough to know which plants heal. You need to have the knowledge to make them heal," unquote. This is a spiritual power, this knowledge, an ability rather than a repository of information. Quote, "Every powerful place gives us knowledge. There are powerful places with much energy everywhere in the forest, special places. My grandfather took me to some of them. Every healer has knowledge from these places, from rivers, from waterfalls, from big rocks, from caves, from the hills. But now, the contamination finishes these places. You go to them and there's no energy. There, where the contamination arrives, the energies disappear," unquote. And we can add to that, when the forest disappears, so do the opportunities to receive the energies that build spiritual power. A collaborative, participatory action research project, we hope, may go some way towards revalorizing ancestral practices in a time when all of us urgently need visions for alternative futures to strive for. There are two things I want to point out before I finish about this vision for such a project, especially as a way to expand the discussion some of us here at the conference have been having about reciprocity or how to give something back to the indigenous communities. One, even though I'm acutely aware of the economic hardships which most Napuruna find themselves in, I am also very aware of the conflicts, inequalities, and the change in values which greater money flows bring. This means that the project we're envisioning aims to rebuild ancestral, highly diverse chakras, not with a view to improve local incomes, however important this is, but with a view to foment food sovereignty and make autonomous subsistence and health viable again. Because that is maybe even more important, especially if we consider climate chaos, and yet it is way too rarely addressed. Secondly, I want to share some words which I believe come from the Australian Aboriginal activist Lilla Watson. They go something like this. "If you've come here to help me, then you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. I don't know about you, but I feel trapped in this mode of living, which has given us buildings like this, made of concrete, metals, and toxic glues. Technology like this, made of rare earth minerals, the mining of which contaminates landscapes and displaces and dispossesses forest people all over the world. I work in solidarity with the Napuruna not because I want to give something back for all the convenience and benefit I am able to enjoy at their expense, certain though this is, but because all the convenience and benefit keeps me, myself, imprisoned, and I see a world of forest gardens as a form of liberation. Thank you.